Yeah, it's recording now. Hello, everyone. My name is Negar Habibi. I am the Mossadegh Foundation Lecturer in Iranian Studies and lecturer in the Arts of Islam at the University of Geneva in Switzerland. As a member of the AIS Council, I have the honor of moderating today's panel. Our discussion focuses on damage to historical and cultural sites in times of war, and more specifically on the recent illegal US-Israel war on Iran, which lasted from last February until just 2 days ago. While the ceasefire brings a sense of relief, it does not erase the human and cultural cost. I would like to begin by expressing my deepest sorrow for the loss of innocent lives and the destruction of people's homes and livelihoods. I also want to emphasize our profound concern for the safety of universities, museums, archaeological sites, and Iran's rich cultural and environmental heritage. In recent weeks, several scholars, including Dr. Turaj Daryai and Dr. Susan Babai, have drawn attention to the significance of Iranian heritage, not only for the region, but for humanity as a whole. They have reminded us that treating this heritage is not only a loss, it is a global cultural tragedy. At the same time, archaeologists and researchers have worked urgently to document the damage. A recently compiled map now estimates that around 131 heritage sites have been affected. Organizations such as UNESCO have publicly denounced the devastating consequences of the conflict, while international academic communities in France, the UK, and several other countries have called for stronger monitoring and coordinated global responses to protect Iranian heritage. Iran's history, as we all know, is marked by cycles of destruction and renewal, of attack and patronage, of loss and restorations. Yet, witnessing such a moment in real time is deeply painful. It is also important to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts of colleagues in Iran, especially those from Miras Farhangi and museum institutions, who have worked tirelessly to mitigate damage, even under extremely difficult conditions. 2 days ago, Afarin Emami, director of the Golestan Palace, announced that the executive operations for the emergency protection and documentation of these scattered pieces and elements of the decorations of the historic marble throne Ayvan at Golestan Palace have been completed. A colleague from Tehran also sent me some photos showing how the technical team at the Saadabad Museum complex worked to secure the gas and electricity systems to prevent further damage. And this brings us to the purpose of today's panel. We aim to explore the technical, historical, and material dimensions of these damage, from original construction techniques and past restorations to the immediate and long-term impacts of the recent attacks. Some damage is already visible, but much of it may only emerge over time. Through this panel, we also delve into several details and critical questions. For example, how might the vibrations from bombings further endanger already fragile monuments, particularly in regions like Isfahan, where land subsidence is an ongoing issue? What frameworks does UNESCO provide for protecting cultural heritage in times of conflict? And how can national protocols be strengthened? How may traditional artisanal techniques aid in the restoration of damaged objects and surfaces, and would that be possible at all? And how to use and learn from other nations' experiences, from other wars and natural catastrophes. These questions are especially urgent when we consider the scale of what is at stake. Beyond the 29 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, nearly 40,000 sites have been registered as part of Iran's national heritage since 1930. So please let me to say a few words in Persian, after which we will move to our speakers' presentations, And if we still have some time after the talks, we can open up for a short round table discussion. سلام به همگی. من نگار حبیبی هستم و من مدرس هنرهای اسلامی و ایرانی در دانشگاه ژنو در سوئیس هستم و به عنوان عضو شورای AIS انجمن ایران شناسی افتخار دارم که مدیریت این پنل رو بر عهده بگیرم. موضوع پنل ما آسیب به اماکن تاریخی و فرهنگی در زمان جنگ و به طور خاص جنگ اخیر میان ایالات متحده و اسرائیل علیه ایران که از اسفند ماه گذشته شروع شد و تنها 2 روز پیش پایان یافت. اگرچه آتش‌بس تا حدی موجب آسودگی خاطر است، اما نمیتواند هزینه‌های انسانی و فرهنگی این جنگ را جبران کند. و من مایلم سخنانم را با ابراز عمیق‌ترین همدردی خود نسبت به جان باختن افراد بیگناه، ویرانی خانه‌ها و معیشت مردم آغاز کنم. و همینطور لازم می‌دانم نگرانی جدی خود را نسبت به امنیت دانشگاه‌ها، موزه‌ها، محوطه‌های باستانشناسی و میراث غنی فرهنگی و زیست محیطی ایران بیان کنم. در هفته‌های اخیر شماری از پژوهشگران از جمله تورج دریایی و سوسن بابایی بر اهمیت میراث فرهنگی ایران تاکید کردند. میراثی که نه تنها برای منطقه بلکه برای کل بشریت ارزشمند است. آنان یادآور شدند که تهدید این میراث صرفاً یک خسارت نیست، بلکه یک فاجعه فرهنگی در مقیاس جهانی است. همزمان باستانشناسان و پژوهشگران تلاش کردند تا به سرعت میزان خسارات را مستندسازی کنند. بر اساس نقشه‌ای که اخیراً تهیه شده، حدود 131 محوطه میراثی آسیب دیدند. سازمان‌های مانند یونسکو نیز به طور علنی پیامدهای ویرانگر این درگیری را محکوم کردند و جامعه علمی بین‌المللی از فرانسه تا بریتانیا و سایر کشورها خواستار نظارت بیشتر و هماهنگی جهانی برای حفاظت از میراث ایران شدند. تاریخ ایران همونطور که همه می‌دانیم سرشار از چرخه‌های ویرانی و بازسازی است، از تهاجم و ساختن گرفته تا تخریب و مرمت. با این حال مشاهده چنین لحظه‌ای در زمان حال عمیقاً دردناک است. در این حال باید از تلاش‌های چشمگیر همکارانمان در ایران به ویژه در سازمان میراث فرهنگی و موزه‌ها قدردانی کنیم که در شرایط بسیار دشوار برای کاهش خسارات از هیچ تلاشی فروگذاری نکردند. خانم آفرین امامی، مدیر مجموعه میراث جهانی کاخگلستان، روز چهارشنبه 19 فروردین از پایان اقدامات اجرایی حفاظت اضطراری و مستندنگاری قطعات و اجزای پراکنده تزیینات بنای تاریخی ایوان تخت مرمر کاخگلستان خبر داد. یکی دیگر از همکاران از تهران عکس‌هایی فرستاد که نشان می‌داد تیم فنی در مجموعه موزه‌های سعدآباد چگونه تلاش کردند تا سامانه‌های گاز و برق مجموعه کاخ را ایمن‌سازی کنند تا از هر گونه آسیب بیشتر جلوگیری شود. و این دقیقاً نکاتی است که ما در این پنل به آن می‌پردازیم. هدف ما بررسی ابعاد فنی، تاریخی و مادی این خسارات است. از شیوه‌های ساخت اولیه و مرمت‌های گذشته گرفته تا پیامدهای کوتاه مدت و بلند مدت حملات اخیر. برای اینکه برخی از آسیب‌ها همکنون قابل مشاهده‌اند و بعضی دیگر در آینده آشکار می‌شود. در این پنل همچنین ما به بعضی از سوالات می‌پردازیم. مثلا چگونه ممکن است ارتعاشات ناشی از بمباران‌ها بناهای تاریخی از پیش آسیب‌پذیر را بیش از پیش در معرض خطر قرار دهند، به ویژه در مناطق مانند اصفهان که فرونشست زمین در آن یک مسئله حیاتی است. یونسکو چه چارچوب‌هایی برای حفاظت از میراث فرهنگی در زمان‌های جنگ و درگیری ارائه میده؟ چگونه میتوان پروتکل‌های ملی را تقویت کرد؟ چگونه میتوان تکنیک‌های سنتی صنایع دستی در مرمت اشیا و سطوح آسیب دیده به کار گرفته بشوند و آیا اصلاً چنین چیزی ممکنه؟ چگونه میتوان از تجربیات سایر کشورها از جنگ‌ها و بلاهای طبیعی استفاده کرد و از آنها آموخت؟ اهمیت همه این پرسش‌ها زمانی آشکار میشه که به گستره آنچه که در معرض خطر است توجه کنیم. افزون بر 29 اثر ثبت شده در فهرست میراث جهانی یونسکو، ایران نزدیک به 40,000 اثر دیگر رو هم داره که از سال 1310 در فهرست میراث ملی ثبت شدند. الان از سخنرانان دعوت میکنم تا صحبت‌های خودشون رو آغاز کنن و چنانچه در انتهای صحبت‌ها وقتی موند همه با هم به یک بحث و گفتگویی می‌نشینیم. Our first speaker is Dr. Ladan Akbarnia, head of Curatorial and professor of Islamic World Collection, the Fitzwilliam Museum and the University of Cambridge. Our second speaker is Dr. Farshid Emami, associate professor of art history at the Rice University. The third speaker is Dr. Moya Carey, curator of Islamic collections at Chester Beatty Library. And our final speaker is Dr. Khodadad Rezakhani, the research scholar at the Institute for Iranian Studies, Austrian Academy of Sciences. So, Ladan Jan, the floor is yours. We're listening to you. Thank you. You should just unmute yourself. Sorry.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, couldn't find the mouse. صحبتم تموم شد. خیلی ممنون نگار جون. من بیشتر صحبتمو به انگلیسی خواهم کرد برای اینکه از لهجه من فکر میکنم که برای همه بهتر باشه. I'll stick to English for most. I might sort of go back and forth between Persian and English. Like Nagar, I first want to just express my deep sorrow and I don't know, I have feelings of helplessness, guilt for our families and our friends and all the people who are trying to make things work and continue. And I've been struck even in the messaging that we're getting of the as deeply rooted as the culture of this country is, so deeply rooted is the resilience of this people. And I think that is the one sort of beacon of light that I see that I hope will kind of help as we try to take next steps. I really appreciate that what you're trying to do is bring people together to see what are some kind of, my mother always says, like, just think like a machine, so that we think what can be useful that we can do. And some of this may not end up being useful, but whether it's just getting the story out there, which we're so grateful to colleagues like Susan and Turaj and to other colleagues who've put letters out there. I know there was also one in the Times that was drafted by Ali Ansari and Vesta Sarhosh Curtis. So I think that's one thing. And I think what I'm trying to really look at is, first of all, just trying to find a way to get to the place where we can focus on cultural heritage without feeling like we're turning our backs on people who are trying to survive. And the way that I see that connection is the humanity that is reflected in these monuments and our heritage. It's so intimately tied to us as human beings, in the same way that there are, hospitals, churches, sites of faith, sites of synagogues. What so many places have been damaged already. I know Farshid and Khodadad, I believe, are going to go more into that. But I think it may feel difficult for many of us to talk about these monuments as if we feel they take space away from our fellow Iranians who've suffered, death, injuries, but also, and this has been going on for decades, whether at the hands of an invader or from within the country itself. And I think that connection reminds us that these are layers of stories that are told through our monuments. We've had different relationships with them. And I think what's interesting and what's really the reason I went into museum work, which is where I think I kind of become connected to this, is I was interested in cultural preservation. I was interested in finding ways that we can understand the value of culture as much as we understand the value of health, of safety, of security, because that's what gives us, whether it's pride, whether it's appreciation, whether it's an appreciation for not just Iranian culture, but the depths and layers of Iranian culture and how diverse that is, but also how over time it's these monuments like Saadabad, Gulistan, Ali Rapu, Persepolis. These you might think at first kings, and royalty and these grand affairs and ceremonies, but there were people who walked through those same buildings at the time they were built or built them from the ground up, who were responsible for the intricate craftsmanship that covers the walls or the objects that were placed within them. And these tell us as much about the makers as about the people who were able to perceive them, receive them, and enjoy them. And then over time, those same spaces became the gardens that I walked through trying to avoid the swans. I believe they were swans, not geese, at the Golestan Palace Library while doing dissertation research. And then what are the memories that I took away? They were the tea times that I had with the other colleagues that I would see daily when I would go do research. So they bring different stories to different people, and they belong to us in different ways. And I think if we can see that, then we understand hopefully a little more why it's so important not to lose these. When we lose these monuments, when they're damaged, they're chipping away at our history, at our identity. They damage all of us because it's part of a global heritage. And so what can we do about it? And I think we all want to document what's happening. We appreciate those efforts that are being made that we know about. We want to understand the extent of damage. I think we have to collect that information with the understanding that that can be constantly changed. And if we have this sort of yield mentality, that hopefully we just need to be, maybe that's what we can be doing here. If there's a way for us to collect this, because that's also what we do as scholars. And then the other thing that I think about when I think, what is there something that we can do, is I look across to our colleagues, our friends in other sort of sometimes more parallel, sometimes less parallel situations, whether in Gaza, whether our Armenian friends, whether Syria, Iraq, other, Ukraine, all regions where there have been similar moments where there's this effort and this need to save, preserve culture. So I feel if international law can't help us, and I know we're not going into the politics of it, but we kind of can't escape the politics, obviously, it's how we got here. But what can we do to be productive and constructive? And I think one way is, when law doesn't work, when international law isn't helping us, can we look to other efforts and see what they did and learn from them? Some of those tragedies, they have become playbooks for tragedies that happen later. And so we can learn from them, and they will be very generous with that information with us. So I hope there are things that we can do to work together with them. And then I think the other is also looking at the work we do in the different museums we're at least from my point of view. I'm sure Moya will have her perspective there. We are constantly learning, and increasingly so, I think, increasingly valuing material culture and craftsmanship alongside the inspiring work that our contemporary artists are doing. I know there are many artists who right now can't do any work, and whether it's the creative process, mostly the logistics and what they're going through right now. I also know of others who are continuing. That is, as much as they can do, that's keeping them going. And so they're trying to share that with us. And so we can then share what they're doing and share that with the rest of the world. But I think what's really important is making sure that living craft traditions aren't lost, that we can find ways of even looking at other examples, like in Egypt, I want to just find the name of the Egyptian Heritage Rescue Foundation that has worked to preserve the medieval minbars of Cairo through a big restoration project that started with documentation and then pinpointing areas that could be restored. What can we do to learn from Iranians in Iran, from our colleagues in Iran, from our own skills and that we bring to the table, to help make sure that we don't lose that, and we don't lose the possibility to continue these craft traditions, because this knowledge itself is not, it's not in a vacuum, it's not tied up and frozen. That's what can hopefully help us as we move forward to preserve and restore. And finally, I hope to we get to that place where we can also look at ways that we can help protect works from future damage. And understanding, I really appreciate how you brought in how connected what's happening in heritage is to what's happening in geography, and across the land, and seeing, can we learn from earthquake prone destinations? So I think I just wanted to put these general thoughts out there and then lead into the other speakers. But this is the way that I sort of feel I can address the situation in a productive way, but it clearly has to be collaborative. And again, my thoughts and prayers go with our friends and colleagues in Iran, and we look forward to the day where we can work even more actively to help each other.
Thank you, Ladan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Farshid, you should just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Sure, and I can go ahead and share my slides. So I just wanted to say thank you, Negarjan, for putting together this panel. This is just nothing, very little thing we can do, so what I'm gonna do and talk about is one particular example of kind of Iranian art, aspect of Iranian architecture that has been damaged in recent attacks. And it's going to be a focus on Esfahan. And so, what the point that I want to highlight is how interconnected Iranian architecture, Iranian art has been to the world, right? I know a lot of colleagues are now talking about art of Sasanian Iran, pre-Islamic Iran as being part of late antiquity. For those of us who work on the Safavid period, we are showing how Iran has always been connected to the early modern world. So those connections, and also this aspect of Iranian art that I'm going to talk about, which is let me share my screen, which is mirror work in Iranian architecture, which sort of exemplifies that. Mirror work is a living heritage in Iran. It is started in Esfahan. The earliest examples that we have date from the 17th century. So we know that the Chehel Sutun Palace, which was the greatest palace and the largest audience hall on the Safavid palace complex, had mirror decorations. And we have old photographs from the late 19th century that shows that all the columns and walls were covered with mosaics of glass mirrors. This is a building that has gone through several phases of restoration, and so the mirrors were removed in the late 19th century, and the Chehel Sutun was restored in the 1960s and 70s. This is a little known fact, but all the columns, wooden columns, have steel I-beams in them. That was part of the restoration by ISMO at the time, which gives it more stability. But this is more about, there might be a structural stability, but Iranian architecture is also about its ornamentation. If you remove the ornamentation, the building loses much of its character. Today at the Chehel Sutun, mirror work is preserved only in small parts. These likely date from the early 18th century when the talar, the columned hall, was restored after it caught fire. But we know through the old photographs that originally all the columns and the back walls were covered with mirrors. And this is an art form that continued to flourish in the 19th century. This is a characteristic aspect of Iranian architecture, Ain Kari. These are two famous examples, Shrine of Imam Reza in Mashhad and Golestan Palace in Tehran, the famous Talar Aine. It has also inspired modern artists in the work of Munir Shahrudi Farmanfarmayan, who took inspiration from traditional mirror work to create these modern abstract sculptures. She was a pioneering woman artist of her generation. And recently, Iran has registered art of mirror work in UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage. So totally a living tradition. But what is interesting about art of mirror work is it was entirely new in early modern Iran in 16th, 17th century Iran, because before the 17th century, 16th century, mirrors were primarily made from metals like steel or bronze. But beginning in the 16th century, mirrors were imported from Venice, where artisans active on the island of Murano had mastered the art of creating thin glass mirrors. So it's kind of connected to the developments of the world. It's an effort by Iranian artisans to turn a new technology into a decorative idiom. And it particularly developed under Shah Abbas in Esfahan. So there's a huge cluster of monuments near the Maidan and Nakhsh Jahan and the image of the World Square. And in recent attacks, almost all the buildings in the area, in the palace complex, have been damaged. We don't have a documentation, but from the images that I have seen, I don't have exact information. It seems that all the buildings have suffered some damage, and especially the Chel Sutun. So this is a very type of intricate artwork. This is the full development of it at the Chehel Sutun, where you have this very intricate stucco tracings in geometric and vegetal forms, covering mosaics, glass mosaics, and these are some of the old photographs. So Chehel Sutun is very significant for its mirror decoration, but also for its murals. It's the most important collection of mural paintings dating from the Safavid period here, and I show you some of the images from inside. So this is the building. It's difficult to assess the damage that has been made to the structure, but maybe the structure is holding up. So that's something that needs to be determined through close examination. But these are images of some detailed images of the damage made to these very intricate tile mirror decorations. They are very fragile, and it's. I mean, this is the building wouldn't be Chehel Sutun wouldn't be the Chehel Sutun without its ornamentation. So I mean, this is very, very painful and very sad to see the damage to these mirror decorations. And it's also the same in the Eivan Takht Marmar at the Golestan Palace, as Negar mentioned. The damage from vibrations from a nearby explosion sort of caused damage to these. These are from the images that have been published online, where you see this fragile stained glass and a mirror decoration of the Eivan Takht Marmar, which dates from the early 19th century reign of Fath Ali Shah, was damaged. So maybe the structure is still holding up, but I mean, it's all about its without its glass and mirror decoration, it wouldn't be the Eivan Takht Marmar. It's all about this intricate form of mirror and glass decoration. So I also wanted to highlight and end my presentation with highlighting the importance of heritage of Iranian modernist architecture. There's a lot of emphasis on prehistoric architecture of Iran and the damage that was caused to them, and that's definitely right. But several buildings of significance, which are masterpieces of Iranian modern architecture, were also damaged or fully demolished. So one example is the Senate House. The Senate House was built in 1955-59. It was meant to be the house of an upper legislation chamber of the Iranian constitution. It was envisioned in the constitution of 1906, but didn't realize until 1950. And the building was designed by Iranian architect Heydar Qiai. It was this is a completely completely following the precepts of modernist architecture in the mid 20th century. You have the brise soleil, this grid on the facade, which is meant to she's meant to provide shade for the building, and that kind of austere, unadorned, geometric design of the building. One interesting aspect of the building are these two columns on the sides. These sculptural columns were designed by French sculptor André Bloch, and they were meant to represent the chain of justice and chain of justice of the Sasanian king Khosrow Anushiravan. So legend holds that there was a chain connected to a bell at the palace of Anushiravan, where people could go and ring the bell to seek justice. So Heydar Qiai, and you have the sketch of it on the right-hand side, said that he was inspired by that in designing these two chain-like elements. After the revolution, this was used for the Majlis for 2 decades before the new Majlis Parliament building was constructed. And it was later used for the Majlis Khobregan, Assembly of Experts. I haven't seen any photos of the damaged building, and it's sort of suggestive of how what we know from the damage to historic sites and buildings in Iran is controlled, and it's limited by what is allowed to be published or not be published, right, and not be known. But BBC has published these aerial photographs, and you can see that the before and after the damage that the building is almost. The dome chamber is almost entirely damaged. So while historic buildings are have been damaged partially, we know that several masterpieces of Iranian modernist architecture, like the Senate House, are also, entirely gone. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Farshid Jan. It seems that also in Boulevard Andarzgou and other parts of Tehran also there were some, yeah. Thank you. Moya?
Thanks, Nagar. Sorry, Farshid, I'm just kind of digesting the shock of that. Nagar, thank you for inviting us to talk about this. And it's such a grim time. We know so little. We are waiting for information to open up to share and so on. So we're in this odd period, I suppose, of knowing some things but so little, and it's really quite painful for everyone. And that is news about friends, family, as well as monuments and colleagues and places. So it's quite a grim time to be talking about this. I have just a few sort of responses, really. I mean, Ladan, you talked about our the fact that world monuments and national monuments, they're really long-term habitats for everyone, but they are part of, yes, the history of makers and patrons and, of course, major state producers, but then they are habitats for all visitors forever. And that yes, they were made for a specific patron, but they're forever, and they should be. And I think monuments and material culture, they're really part of this interconnected civil infrastructure that should be interconnected, that by its definition, and Farshid sort of echoes that sort of position of Iran, this sort of central interconnectivity that Iran has always had, but specifically in the Safavid period, as the early modern world, Iran is so central. And interconnection is a sort of huge value for human beings. We are interconnected, not only to each other at the same time, but long term in our memories, and that our objects and I kind of include material culture. So where does the object begin and end with a building like Chelsea, where everything down to tiny fragments of mirror, which is a physical sort of fitted object, I guess, that is a man-made masterpiece. It's not as mobile, I guess, as a smaller museum object that you could wrap up or put into a display, but a historic palace really is a museum level object, and it's something that it really hurts to see attack upon, because first of all, we care about it. We had this long-term memory engagement with it, but it also belongs to the future. And to take it from future generations it's a particularly toxic thing to witness, because ultimately our lifetimes as human beings are so short, and we want we only have temporary responsibility for the things around us. We try to look after them, but our little lifespans are just a fleck in the long history of it. And really the time traveler is the object or the building, and we want, they will see us. What we want is for them to see us all out, and we'll just be around them and get to go there now for a little flash. But really they are for, they belong to the future. And that fragility, that materiality is, generally is something that you try to protect against environment, as you say, of subsidence and just the material condition which makes things decay. This is our real, as human in our human lives, but also for material objects. The reality is that everything is fragile, but really our relationship of care and memory and emotional investment is part of what makes us people and not machines. And we are so vulnerable right now. As I said at the beginning, we know so little. It's so painful what's happening to our friends and colleagues and families, and then to the future generations who will inherit broken things from us. So I guess that's not enormously optimistic of me, but this is quite a difficult time, and I'm glad we're together, but this is hard. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
Thank you so much, Moya. I already have some questions, but please, Khodadad, please, you should unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Negar-Jan, for putting this together. Thank you to Ladan, Farshid, and Moya for the comments. As you know, I'm not actually I do not have any expertise in cultural heritage or visual culture. I'm a very boring historian. The only connection I have to cultural heritage and the wonderful work that you do are a bunch of coins that's exactly, I've chosen the ones that nobody cares about. But I think my connection to this might be that, other than being concerned, like all of us, about the cultural heritage of Iran and what is happening, is the fact that, well, I guess the most immediate thing is that I was in Iran last May, and perchance ended up actually visiting the places that got bombed in particular detail. So I actually went around Kah Gulistan with Emami and a couple of other people who work for the collection, and saw places and was allowed into back rooms and things that usually the regular visitors are not allowed to. And you have a particular connection with these things. And then I was in Isfahan with a bunch of amateur architectural historians, architects who are doing their own architectural history sort of work, and they were mostly concentrating on the Seljuk buildings in Isfahan, which I'm, by the way, sort of, as the kids these days say, low-key worried that nobody talks about, because everybody talks about the Safavid buildings, and I have no idea what might have happened to these wonderful buildings that are behind the bazaar, and including the Masjid Jami of the Seljuk period, all of the monuments. And then I heard a couple of pieces of news that I couldn't confirm about bombing in the historical cemetery of Takht Fulad, which has amazing buildings, which I have not seen people really talk about. And we went around all of these and looked at this, and I'm thinking if anything like a shockwave comes near the Masjid Jami, some of those buildings probably can't stand anything beyond the very hard push with hand. So what's going to happen or has happened to them, I have no idea. So that's my personal connection. And the other connection is, well, because I know people, I actually get news of what is going on. So I immediately got in touch as soon as I could, and I got some news from people who work for Miras in Iran, and tried to see what they are doing, which is when they told me that already before the war started, when they were anticipating anything happening, they moved out all of the movable objects, including in the Hall of Mirrors that you could protect. But, well, there's so much only you can move out. And downstairs, where there was this whole, all of these mosaics are there, they try to protect the mosaics downstairs. And of course, the building, for example, Kakh Golistan, is very interesting because it was almost completely renovated as far as the structure goes during the time of Shah in the late 60s and 70s because of the coronation ceremony of the Pahlavis, which they had assessed correctly that the building's Qajar basis, particularly the second floor, can't take the number of people are going to show up. So it has been renovated, and I was looking at pictures and I could see now parts of the ceiling falling out and exposing the Pahlavi enforcement and renovation. And then I know that they actually did a pretty good, thorough renovation of the mirrors only a few years ago. So some of these things being destroyed, including also the Orsi right behind the throne in the Takht Marmar, which seems to have completely broken and caved in, including the frame. I was looking at as closely as I could into the wooden frame. And, well, these things, how are we going to deal with them? The things that have been destroyed, some of them seem to be original, some of them seem to be the restored ones. And my worry right now, not knowing these things, is that my experience, and I know, again, we said we are not going to get into politics, and this is only very mild politics, I hope, is that the renovations in Iran have often been done by architects and have been done by people who are concerned with modern architecture, and often not very well done in sort of correspondence and cooperation with people whose primary concern is art history, basically the people that are in this picture except me. So one of the things I'm worried about is when we go back, when there is the time to do the renovations, is a closer sort of cooperation between experts such as you guys here and the people in Iran who are going to actually do this. I'm not suggesting that there are not enough art historians in Iran. I'm sure there are wonderful art historians in Iran, but I just feel like that sort of communication is not ever done because of probably bureaucracy. And one of the things that I like to do, I like to be involved in, and what we sort of try to do, I'm very glad that the University of Tehran's one of the departments, and it seems to be that Chicago and a couple of other places are participating in documenting the damages. But I do realize, because of the political issues, because of the lack of communication between Iran and the outside world, and lack of access that we on this side of the world have, and also the bureaucracy in Iran, there seems to be a bit of a lag or disconnect between the two different authorities. And I'm hoping that at least us here, not that I'm trying to see the positive in tragedy, but I'm trying to use the tragedy as a basis of possibly us getting through and being given more access of actually helping bringing on not just the information that we have here and we use, but rather to practical use in Iran, in cooperation with the Iranian authorities and with the wonderful people in Miras, who I have to say that I wish one of them was here and I wasn't. Again, I'm useless here. It should have been people from Miras, and hopefully in the future iterations of such a thing, when we have internet, I would be the audience and they would be talking. But in just putting a couple of words with them, they get very bad reputation. They constantly get beaten down on being ignorant of these things and that. And I know that they are wonderful, dedicated, really people who don't sleep at night thinking a mirror might have fallen off. And the pictures of those things, I can only imagine what happened to their mental health, besides everything else. We have to work with our colleagues, and we have to somehow establish closer working relationships with them and help along with this tragedy and see what we can do. I know, Negar, you wanted the translation.
It was a good, point for us to start our
Okay.
discussion.
All right,
I think we can still have 10 minutes, maybe Ladan and John with us, and then, but it was a very good point, to start all these discussions. Actually, it is with such a sorrow that we can't have anyone from Miras, and it is just because we couldn't connect with them. It's this real material problem. But I think all these talks were, somehow interrelated, but I want to start maybe as an example just by Ayna Kari, which just has been accepted as the Iran intangible heritage right by UNESCO 2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that. It's so
right. Very recently, yeah.
Yeah, very
God, the irony.
Yeah.
Irony, actually, yeah. So it means that we can use this craftsmanship, right, these artisanal techniques to renovate and to restore what we have already lost. Does that mean that we have these craftsmen really that can, transmit these ancestral techniques?
Yeah, definitely. And but going back to the point Khodadad made, I mean, there needs to be, so the way mirror work was applied to buildings in Safavid period is not similar to the way it is, actively, or Qajar or 20th century. So there needs to be a conversation between art historians and conservators. And I'm sure, as Khodadad mentioned, there are totally knowledgable art historians, definitely in Miras, in Esfahan. So it should be a conversation. So this is definitely a living tradition, but it has gone through different phases. The techniques have changed, and sort of acknowledging that novelty of the material in the early modern period in the 17th century, and how it was sort of indigenized and adopted into and incorporated into the vocabulary of Iranian decoration that was sort of long-lasting. So it's my wish is that we are, as we are renovating these monuments, hopefully we are also increasing awareness of their historic significance.
Sorry, Moya, I saw that you have a question, but Ladan John, do you know, for the Egyptian experience, did they start exactly this collaboration between the, the art historian, those who have this theoretical base, and the artisans? You're on mute. Do we have any, documentation about their efforts and their...
You mean who did them? Who made the efforts?
Yeah, as if they were this collaboration between these two, body of works, the craftsman and the art historian, or, those who have this.
Well, I know for a fact because my colleague, Dr. Omnia Abdelbar, who's been involved with this project and sits with this foundation, she introduced me to this project, and she has a background as an architect, but also as an art historian and architectural historian. So she sort of brought both of these strengths to the table. But what this foundation does that is so important is work with local craftsmen and craftspeople, and they connect, the knowledge that historians bring, that architects bring, and then the skills and knowledge that the craftspeople bring. But there are some cases where over time, some elements of things can be lost. And as Moya pointed out, and I think I had tried to say earlier as well with monuments, and Farshid has brought this up, even the ways that you adhere work to monuments can change over time. And that's also in an effort to preserve it and make it last longer. So I think in the same way, one of the challenges they came across was that some of the designs in the woodwork, this sort of interlocking woodwork that is done for many of these minbars, that was some of those patterns had to be rediscovered by the most experienced craftsmen in this tradition that exists. And so he had to actually work out the mathematics. He had to work. But he had the background and the experience and the knowledge to be able to achieve that, and so what they want to do, they use that then as a way. They went and collected information, they gathered, they documented the process, and then they agreed out of all of these, which ones could they pinpoint to start restoration and create replicas. And so through that, they both made efforts to restore, but then also to teach others to take these around. So we used actually 2 of these panels in my exhibition last year, and that was a way to understand how this worked, why the tradition is so important, the challenges that come about, how to continue to keep them living, and also pinpointing the danger and the very real threat of losing knowledge. And so that's what we don't want to do. So if those who are practicing these traditions right now, we have to do everything we can to support them. But, we're also at risk of losing them every time we lose a person, so.
What about AI? Do we think that AI could, don't be afraid, Khodadad, but it's just,
No.
that is there any use of AI in these kind of situations?
Even the word scares me.
Yeah.
It's not really what this is. This is about conservation science, I think, ultimately, and it's really important to separate restoration from conservation, especially with historic architecture, especially really complicated places like Curatorial and Chelsea, and these places which have actually hundreds of years of interventions after fires or rebuildings or restructures, or the mortar failing and something being something, as I say, just a material condition. It doesn't have to be a violent event, but that buildings, more than any object, keep working and they keep building. But there's such an opportunity, I hate to say it, when there's been big damage, to sort of peep behind the surfaces and to learn more about the materiality of the building. So I think this is boringly a slow job of heritage conservation, of analysis of types of glass. You wouldn't dream of taking a piece of glass down out of any Aina Carey, but if some of it had fallen down, you have a shred to study, and you can expand knowledge just a little bit on the physical content of the glass and the structures behind vaulting. These are things, when the monument is intact, you're so lucky you've inherited an intact monument, but if there's been damage, you can actually see a little bit more of it structurally. So in terms of what can we draw out of this, there's great opportunity for studying structures, I guess, and like understructures. It's a slow job. My worry is hurrying to restore things quickly and making them look great right away. That is really dangerous, actually. So over-enthusiastic restoration that's going straight to the cosmetic, glorious finish as if nothing ever happened, that's problematic and really, really risky for the physical building. But it's a learning opportunity and I think Miras has great conservation science. I've got to say, just from the few people I've worked with in terms of architectural engagements with the monuments, and like a really thorough material understanding of exactly what the multiple surfaces and media are of Safavid architecture in particular. It's such It's so sophisticated, and as far as she said, without the decorations, you're just looking at the skeleton, but it's the whole body is what makes this, in terms of understanding what's being projected and what's being done. Visible scars are something that people have an emotional relationship with, by which I mean retaining evidence of there being damage. And that is a political decision if it's made ultimately, in terms of how much you restore and how much you conserve and how much you acknowledge as having happened. And post-conflict display always has to engage with, it has to make a decision. Because if you're adjusting the surface of any physical object, if it's a manuscript or an enormous palace, you're deciding where to draw the line and what to change. Most conservation protocol is that don't do anything that is irreversible. Don't, pour concrete, just, hold, retain the materiality of the thing as much as you possibly can. Only insert things that won't damage and that will support but not overlay and won't damage. So it's got to be done slowly. Politically, that's often not an attractive thing to say, because people want recovery and they need recovery. And of course, objects in buildings, sorry, not objects, monuments have this emotional relationship with everyone. So it belongs to, historians have to share basically the impact of these places with much bigger demographics with different needs and wishes. But I think we need to go on the conservation rather than the restoration side of this, and be patient about it. I guess Notre Dame and the fire is something that was kind of in the back of my mind, where it's a traumatic event for Paris and most of us. The slow rebuilding had to be done, because it's a building. You can't just leave it in ruins. You have to act, but you're making decisions, and you will learn about the physical thing as you go in. You wish you didn't have to, but it is something in terms of studying the physicality of these things but you can't. You're going forward in time. You can't reverse it, unfortunately.
So I have a question. What about the sorry, Ladan, just one question. What about the protection? Is it any way to protect the ayne and the mirrors?
Do you mean like if we had a time machine and to go
Yeah,
back?
just to put any adhesive, or I don't know, anything on them can.
Sandbags up to the ceiling?
I don't know. I mean, what happened in the Second World War in France, for example, with Versailles? Do you know? I mean,
They surrendered so they wouldn't bomb it. Is that accurate?
That is
Sorry.
accurate. That is pretty accurate.
That's a decision.
But still, I think I'm not very good, but I would say more than a quarter of Versailles is restored.
Yeah, it needs to look good. It's one of those, banknote buildings.
Exactly.
Like so much of Isfahan is. They need to look.
Which actually brings in a question I have for you guys, because what I
just 1 minute. I think Ladan is just
leaving.
Ladan.
Sorry, go ahead.
She's quitting.
I have to leave, but I just wanted to quickly say that I just wanted to note also the project that I was discussing that the Egyptian Heritage Rescue Foundation is doing. That too, it was born out of tragedy, and the looting that was taking place going back to 2006, and which continued. So, for better or for worse, these responses are often out of lessons learned. But that's why I want to go back to just seeing, like, how can we look at approaches that have been taken by in other similar situations. I mean, you mentioned Notre Dame as well, Moya, too. And I think, and also looking at archives and historic sources that tell us about materials and techniques. Sometimes we get a lot there. And that when it isn't done well, there were a number of Ottoman minarets that popped up all around medieval Cairo when there was information that told what the minarets once looked like. But so I think that's a good point that you raised, Moya, about trying to pause and think conservation as really the first step in restoration.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that I have to run to another panel. And I'm so grateful to be included in this discussion. And I know this is a much wider discussion for all of our colleagues who will see this, and for those beyond that as well. Thank you, Negar.
Great to see you.
Thanks, Khodadad, Moya, Farshid.
Thanks. See you soon.
See you soon.
Khodadad, please go ahead.
I'm really sorry. I have a question for you guys, because again, I come to this as almost a lay observer, I noticed that in the reporting of the news, there was a hierarchy of reports, right? So, of course, Isfahan and anything that happened around Safavid Isfahan got a lot of attention. Kakha Golistan got a lot of attention. I myself gave Kakha Golistan a lot of attention. I'm Tehrani. My mother grew up about 100 meters from Kakha Golistan, so
it's great.
That is something that I obviously relate to. But for example, less so on the Kakha Saadabad. The newer one, or as I said, we don't know what happened in Tahta Fulad or the Seljuk parts, and particularly the Pahlavi thing, because of the politics of Pahlavi thing. It's just very hard to emotionally, I guess, and as scholar, adjust to how much of this should I consider. Since you brought up Versailles for me, this was it. That you go to Paris and you see, wow, this whole thing is. A lot of it is restored, right? So should I be working myself up and putting myself in an emotional state of absolute loss, or should I take a more balanced view of this? And where do I exactly draw this line of what is or what is not crucial and lost beyond? I think one of the Pahlavi palaces is younger than the building, the house that I grew up in. Right, so it's just like nobody would care about my home. Why would we necessarily care about the Pahlavi stuff? I'm being the devil's advocate, but I'm just trying to ask the question of how do we value damage?
Farshid,
That's a Farshid question.
Do you have any?
Sure. I mean, I like your question, the way you're putting it about how much emotional feeling you want to put into the loss of a building. So it's not just about the historicity of the building, but its aesthetic value, right? So the Senate House is how it was 80 years old, but it's the major work. It has value not because it's a very old monument, but because it's a testament. It's a testament to a historic moment. It's a major work. It's a major expression of how chain of justice. The dome was inspired by Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque, so it's it stands for this moment in Iranian history where there's a Senate, when the Shah wants to assert his power, vis-a-vis the parliament. And, Iranian architecture is a work of, again, interconnectedness of Iran. It's an Iranian architect, a graduate, Haydar Ghiyai, a graduate of Faculty of Fine Arts, Hunarhay Ziba Tehran, then going to Beaux-Arts, coming back, establishing a practice, making those connections, and that's creating this work that is sort of following the precepts of modernist architecture to the letter, but also injecting it with, symbolism from Sasanian times and Sheikh Lutfullah, and combining that. So it makes it a great work, and that's the value. It's not necessarily because it's old. Yeah, you're right. I mean, buildings that are part of the public image of what is Iranian architecture, like Isfahan, gets a lot of attention, but others do not. And maybe one of the things we can do in the post restoration period, when the conflict is over, to increase awareness of the significance of these monuments.
That's a very, very good answer. Yeah, I feel like we don't know enough about a lot of these buildings, the architects, the history that is connected. And this is, by the way, Negar, as a suggestion, maybe next time around, instead of me, somebody like Talin Grigor, if she comes in, would be a good person to add to.
The list was, I was
thinking. No, of course. But
I was thinking that in a country that has at least 40,000 sites, I don't know how. I mean,
Iran has so much.
Yeah, and I think they're all important. They're
so important. Yeah.
So how can we talk about them? How can we teach them? That is another question, to make awareness of all these sites. I'm always thinking about all these minare, all these, caravansarais, the bridges that are everywhere in Iran, and not in the middle of a big city. I don't know. I'm so worried for all these vibrations
Yes,
because
it's horrendous. These buildings are, glass, mosaic. They're not made for explosions.
Yeah.
They're just so fragile, and explosives in general
Yeah.
just wrong,
I saw a small report from Contemporary Art in Isfahan.
Oh
I,
yeah.
no, it's not contemporary art, it's decorative art in Isfahan, which
Mhm.
is, I mean, the damage are, yeah, a lot. And it was the director of UNESCO in Iran, who was giving a visit to this site, and they were
Okay.
talking actually about the damage that has occurred during the attacks, but also that these attacks, I mean, um, the building was already fragilized. I mean, many of the ties have been already fallen because of, the climate, what is it?
Climate change.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And especially in Isfahan and all these regions, I mean, in Iran, because of, the water problem.
Yeah, water is the big story. This is I mean, not to go off on a really big one, but humanity has enough problems um globally without this, sort of thing, because we are in serious trouble. And for somewhere like Iran, which is the history of successful water management for millennia, and just the bounty that brings is just, the results of it are just so spectacular and so ancient. And it's as simple as that. Look after our world and everything else will follow. And it really is just heartbreaking to see a climate catastrophe hitting Iran like this, and to see the impact of water and to imagine it without water. It's catastrophic. And as you say, it's literally drying out and subsiding buildings. So it's the land as well as the physical structures are in such danger.
Yeah.
And who needs
I, I,
this?
I always wonder about this, and this is just going to be anecdotal and sort of among friends. Please, if you don't want to do it in the
We'll edit it out later.
in the thing, is that whenever I watch one of these nature documentaries of David Attenborough, and whenever he brings on one more species that is almost going extinct, I'm like, can a couple of politicians look at this and stop doing whatever they are doing? And I feel like we need to do the same thing. I had this very, very weird vision when I was looking at some of the pillars in the Seljuk Mosque in Isfahan, which had been damaged because of the Iran-Iraq war, and they had
Yeah, I was going to add.
they were restored. And I thought, like, oh my God, I hope that never comes again, and I hope this not be a time for me. This is a memory. And
Yes.
this is just weird, like that every time you have to have this anxiety that this might be the last time you see this building.
Yeah. A Scud missile hit it in the 1980s. I think I remember seeing the posters last time I was there as well. And so it's a restoration project, because of course when damage comes and it's a building that's it's a working, interconnected building, it's not going to be left in ruins. It's going to be rebuilt. But it still happened. And isn't there some quote from Farida Dinatar about lovers knowing each other's scars, and that being just part of the damage is to be alive, and to survive it. But they're still scars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what happens to all these AIS mirrors, and
Yeah.
yeah.
yes,
Thank you,
maybe.
everyone.
Okay.
Yes, sure. Yeah. But I mean, mirrors are just, I mean, they're sad, but maybe, I
It's
don't want
just
to be too poetic, but maybe that's also a metaphor
I
for, I
know.
mean, its
Fragility.
fragility, yeah, for what's happening to Iran and its people as well. So,
Yeah. Even more painful.
yeah, they don't deserve it, right?
No.
They're so fragile.
No.
Yeah.
the humanity doesn't deserve it.
any of
I
these
mean,
things.
it's
No,
about
nobody
We are
wants.
also
Nobody wants
resilient.
this.
There's also a
Yeah.
great deal of resilience. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. Fragility and resilience.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a better
Exactly.
metaphor.
We're handing it onwards, but it's just, you want there to be a tomorrow, frankly, and this is just the idea of that we're only temporarily around. We want these monuments to live past us a long, long time. So it's just better to be around when anything happens to them, because I feel like we owe it to the future,
Of course, yeah.
as well as how much it will hurt us. And clearly we're all, in a lot of pain, but it's not, we're like this much of the story, basically. It's so much bigger, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Love you.
Thanks,
Thank
Nagar,
you.
Thank
for
you.
organizing this. And
I hope
that
people will enjoy listening to you, and that some
and we
good
hope we are
ideas.
useful.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
some good ideas and useful ideas come out of this conversation for other scholars, for people in Iran, and
Yeah, for next steps, yeah.
yeah, for next steps. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
including us.
Bye. Good seeing
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
See you
Thanks so
guys
much.
soon.
Bye
Bye.
bye.